Hello my friends, this is the third video in a series of videos on the Saros Cycle, and in this video I'm going to introduce some new observations about the Saros Cycle, which are the beats, the rhythms, or we can call them the vibrations that run through a Saros Cycle. Now here's what happens. As you know, each successive eclipse in the Saros Cycle is separated by 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. How far does the sun move in 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours? Well, it's gone around the zodiac 18 times plus 11 days. A little more than 11 days is going to be about 11 degrees. Okay, so each succeeding eclipse is going to be separated by about 11 degrees. The eclipse, by definition, is a new moon. We can call that the eclipse point. So the eclipse point, that point of the eclipse, of that special new moon that we call an eclipse, is going to move forward about 11 degrees. And remember, the Saros Cycle is looked at as, you know, in ancient astrology, even by astronomers, as something that's connecting, that these events are, from an astronomer's viewpoint, they are beats in the cosmos. I mean, there's a synchronization of these cycles. Now, from an astronomical viewpoint, there's this synchronization, there's this rhythm, but it's just a kind of a physical rhythm. It doesn't imply anything about people's lives. But for astrologers, it's fascinating that there is this beat, this rhythm. And what happens is that this rhythm is occurring every 11 degrees. Not only is it every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, it's also every 11 degrees, moves. And one of the things that Alexander Mzaragich shows in this new book that he's written, Dragons of the Solar Eclipses, is that the sun has moved to a new, what astrologers call decanate, a new decanate. Every 10 degrees is a new decanate. So typically, that 11 degrees is going to move that eclipse point into a new decanate. Okay, that's interesting. What I'm going to show here from the point of view of vibrational astrologers is even more exciting, more precise and interesting for us, is to look carefully at what aspect is that movement. So what I did, and this was very time-consuming, but I was so curious, I just had to know, is that what I did in the Sirius software, I pulled up an eclipse, and let's show this wheel. So I have this eclipse. This is the first eclipse in Saros Cycle 147 on October 12th, 1624. And what I did is I did a bi-wheel. I just went over here and selected bi-wheel, and I did a bi-wheel with the next eclipse. And if you remove the sort, usually the sort is very helpful, but for a series of solar eclipses, this removing the sort can be nice, because now they're in date order. So I'll show you what I did in case you want to do something similar. All I did is I went to bi-wheel, and I put the first chart at the top, the current chart, which is the first one, and I put the second one in the outer ring. That's all I did. And then I got this bi-wheel. And I took the bi-wheel, the small bi-wheel. When you select the bi-wheel, it asks you the style. I'll show you. You go in here and you select the small wheel and aspect grid. And then you see sun to sun, 15 degrees, 15 degrees, why would sun to moon, 15 degrees, 22 minutes is the distance. Let me see here, partial. Oh, sorry, I've got this as local space. I was fooling around with this. Let me change this. This is local space. This, when I was doing the latitude, I had local space. Let me set it back. Settings, zodiac, settings, coordinate system, normal. In order to see the latitude, which I showed in the second part, I had to go to local space. I'll show you. What I did, is I'll go to settings, coordinate system, and do local space, horizon, or azimuth altitude. Any of these three, it doesn't matter. They're all variations of what we call an azimuth altitude chart. And then I right click and I select a wheel style like C equals small or technical, and then instead of latitude it shows the altitude. That's how I found out what the altitude is for each return, for each eclipse. So the local space chart was very useful for me to quickly see the altitude. But now I want to do a comparison of two eclipses in normal zodiac longitude. Okay, so now I selected this bi-wheel. I've already selected so I can pull it up. That's better. That's better. If we look at the inner ring, this is eclipse on October 12th, 1624. And it is a partial solar eclipse, astrological. I can talk about that too some other time, astrological versus astronomical. I'll make a separate video about that if you would like. I think I talk about that in videos on astrology for astronomy, but let's skip over that for now. And it's Saros Cycle 147, number 1. In astrology, we usually want the astrological eclipse, not astronomical. I can explain that later. And then here's the outer ring, solar eclipse on October 23rd, 1642. There's the 18 years, 11 days later, and both of these are done for the place of maximum eclipse. I showed that in the first video in this series, how you can select these eclipses for the maximum place. It's also a partial solar eclipse. It's also Saros Cycle 147, but it's number 2. So I don't know if you can read this. This color scheme's kind of ugly, by the way. Let me go right click, OK, customize, other, scroll down. Yeah, I think that's easier to read. Anyway, you can change these things pretty easily. Probably a little easier to read now. So this is number 1 in cycle 147 in the inner ring, and in the outer ring, also Saros Cycle 147, number 2. So these are 2 consecutive returns, and it's 10 degrees 56 minutes. The distance between the suns and moons is 10 degrees 56 minutes. Now if I right click OK, and do a very large wheel, you can read it more easily that this is at 0 Scorpio 22, this is at 19 Libra 27, from 19 Libra 27 to 0 Scorpio is 10 degrees 55 minutes, but that's rounded off. More exactly, it's 10 degrees 56 minutes. So that just shows you that what we already know, that the eclipse point, that point where the eclipse occurs, is about 11 degrees later. It's 10 degrees 56 minutes. So what I did is I clicked on every one of these eclipses and I selected a bi-wheel with the next one. So I went through all of these, selecting the bi-wheel to the next eclipse for every single one so that I could see how far the eclipse moved. And what I found out is this. I found out that 2 consecutive eclipses are between 10 degrees 25 minutes and 11 degrees 12 minutes. So just a little astronomical fact, let me say that again, is that 2 consecutive eclipses in the Saros cycle are separated by somewhere between 10 degrees and 25 minutes and 11 degrees and 12 minutes. That's just the astronomical fact. Because when the sun is in Capricorn, it's moving relatively fast. So in January, the sun is moving faster. You can just look at an ephemeris and you'll see that the sun is moving faster when it's in Capricorn, because it's near, the Earth is near the perihelion. The Earth is closer to the sun. So it's moving faster. Around July, the sun is moving slowest. So consequently, the distance varies. Okay, now, for vibrational astrologers, this gets very interesting. The belief is that the Saros Cycle is a kind of fabric in the universe. It's connecting us historically to previous times and to future times. It's a little thread connecting things together. It's very fascinating. And it's in a beat of every 11 degrees. And here's what happens. When the moon is moving, when this sun is moving the fastest, up near 11 degrees 12 minutes, the aspect between successive eclipse points is a 1/32nd aspect. When it's down around 10 degrees 55 minutes, it's 1/33rd. At 10 degrees 36 minutes, it's 1/34th. And at 10 degrees 17 minutes, which it never gets quite to that, it only gets 10 degrees 25 minutes, but it would be within orb of a 1/35th. Bottom line is this. Eclipse points, those powerful eclipse points that are connected together in the Saros Cycle, if the Saros Cycle has implications for human beings and it's important astrologically, they are vibrating to 32, 33, 34, or 35, and typically 33 or 34, and rarely 32 and 35. That's what they are vibrating to. And this also took a lot of time. Preparing all this and figuring this out took a lot of time because I wanted to know what beat it's in. So when it's July, this is also going to be seasonal. In July, wait, do I have this right? In July, the sun is moving the fastest. So yes, in July, it's only going to be 10 degrees 25 minutes between eclipse points. That's going to be a 35 vibration with 74% strength. It's also a 34 vibration with 61% strength. What this means is that when an eclipse occurs in July, it has both a 35 and a 34 vibration. 35 a little stronger. And then when it gets out to 10 degrees 30 minutes, the 34 vibration becomes stronger. When it goes to 10 degrees 35 minutes and 10 degrees 40 minutes, it's 34 vibration. If the strength goes below 0.5, it's weak. So what I've done here is I put the vibration that's above 0.5 strength. So as the distance changes between successive eclipses, and it gets closer and closer to 11 degrees, it goes from 35 and 34 to pure 34 to a combination of 34 and 33. And then for a short time, it's 33. And then for a short time, it's 32. What we find out is that the successive eclipses are in 34 vibration, the most common. Picks up a little bit of 35 sometimes, picks up, it becomes 33 sometimes and 32 sometimes. And more specifically, here it is. Here it is. So to summarize, here's what a 1/32nd, 1/33rd, 1/34th, 1/35th. This is how many degrees and minutes each aspect is. And here's the conclusion. It's all leading up to this. Drum roll. Brrr. It's leading up to this. If an eclipse occurs between March and October, that eclipse is almost certainly in 34 vibration. Each successive eclipse in the Saros Cycle, the idea is that the Saros Cycle is like a thread. Those eclipses every 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours apart, they're threaded together. They have the same geometry. The node has come back with that new moon. That's an eclipse. That rhythm is vibrating to 34 for over half a year. So Bottom line is that eclipses are usually in 34 vibration. And if it's in July, the eclipse occurs in July, it'll also have some 35 vibration. And by the way, the 34 peaks in April. So it starts in March, peaks very quickly, and then gradually gets weaker and weaker until about October, and it starts fading out. As the 34 vibe fades out, 33 kicks in. So eclipses in October and November have 33 vibration. Okay, I've got some typos here. They peak in late October and early November. I've got a bunch of typos there, but so if an eclipse occurs in late October, early November, it's very strongly 33 vibration. And then also 33 for most, basically October and November, and in the middle of that, very strong 33. So what you have is 34 vibration is the most common, like March through October. In the Northern Hemisphere, that's going to be like spring to autumn, from like March to October. You can think of it that way. Northern Hemisphere, just call it spring to autumn. In Southern Hemisphere, it's just the opposite. Spring to autumn, 34 vibe. Right in the middle of summer in July or middle of winter in the Southern Hemisphere, picks up 35 vibe. A 33 vibe comes in for just 2 months, October, November. And then in winter in the Northern Hemisphere, November to February, it's 32 vibe. Peaking right around New Year's in December and January. Late December, so November to February, 32 vibe. This means that the primary purpose of eclipses is 34 vibration. 34 equals 17 times 2. 17 is intercultural. It connects, this is amazing, it connects different times and places. 17 brings us into stories that we don't live in. It's why we love literature. It's why we love movies. It's why we love any story about another life, about somebody living at another time, or another place. It's why we're so intrigued by things that we did not grow up with. That's 17 vibe. It gives empathy. It gives interest. It gives a talent for acting, for feeling, for empathy, for moving into a story that you were not born into. And that's exactly what eclipses do. They connect us to a different time. So how appropriate is it that over half of the eclipses are in 34 vibration? And those eclipses that occur from March to October, we hypothesize perform the basic essential function of eclipses, which is to connect us to another point in time. Not so much a place, because in this case it's time, a different setting. And it goes back, and back and back and into the future. So, an eclipse occurs every, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Over time, eclipses might be in, say, September, and then, 10 eclipses later, it's now moved into 33 vibration. So through the Saros Cycle, the eclipses will move through the calendar. In fact, let's look at it. If we can look at it we can just look at these dates on the right side. This cycle started in October, November, December, January, February, March. It's moving right through the calendar. 300 years later, from 1624 to 1931, it's moved from October to April. When does it reach October again? It reaches October again in 2219. So from 1624 to 2219, that's 600 years. In 600 years, it's gone around the zodiac. So, basically goes through the zodiac twice. So every Saros cycle is going to spend most of its time in 34 vibration, a little bit of its time in 33 vibration, and it will in 33 vibration, and a little bit of its time in 32, and a very tiny amount of its time in 35 vibration. And never completely 35. It'll share 35 with 34, as we see in this table. Picks up some 35 vibration in July. So every Saros cycle is going to vibrate most of the time to 34 vibration, performing its essential function of connectivity, of having us move out of the frame of reference that we live in. That's completely consistent with what a Saros cycle is. And then it will spend a little bit of time in 33 vibration, performing a different function of progressiveness and movement. And then sometimes 32 vibration. I've got the meanings a little bit later. Let me go into the meanings again later. But let me show you right now, before I wax eloquent on the meanings of these vibrations. Let me get back to that in a second. Let's focus on what I mean by beat. Look at this beat to make it very clear. Here in the inner ring is the eclipse on April 28, 1949. It's just an arbitrary eclipse. Happens to be the one 3 days before I was born. In the inner ring. That's eclipse number 19 in Saros Cycle 147. The next one is 18 years later on May 9th, 1967. Again, Saros Cycle 147, number 20. 2 consecutive eclipses. This is the 17 vibration chart. Partial 17th harmonic solar eclipse. Partial 17th harmonic solar eclipse. 2 consecutive eclipses. 2 consecutive Saros Cycle eclipses. And I put the 17 vibration charts and look at the sun and moon. Look at the sun and moon. This sun and moon on the eclipse before I was born are at 10 Capricorn 55 in the 17 vibration chart. Opposition. The next 17 vibration chart with only a 3-minute orb. This means that when I was born on a very crystal clear 34 vibration beat in the eclipse. Very clear. And in fact, look at this. Here's 3 consecutive. This is in the inner ring, same one. There it is, same position. 10 Capricorn 55. Middle ring is the one 18 years later. I just showed you, same as the biwheel. But I've added a third one. Then third eclipse in this cycle. So we've got number 19, 20, and 21. The next one, another 18 years on May 19th, 1985. Sun and moon are at 10 Capricorn. So what we've done is we've gone from 10 Capricorn to 10 Cancer to 10 Capricorn. It's going to bounce back and forth between Capricorn and Cancer 10 degrees, and then it'll move gradually to 9, 8, and then at a certain point it'll start picking up either 33 vibration or 35 vibration. You get the idea. It's going to spend, again, most of the consecutive eclipses in a Saros cycle are perfectly synchronized if you put them into 17 vibration, bouncing back and forth. And so 17 times 2 equals 34 really emphasizes the two-ness. 17 times 2, get into the stories of other people. Find out what your heritage is. Find out, the heritage of your nation, of your family, of everything. Find out the other stories that are going on. And the global, not just your personal, globally. That's what it's about. Fascinating. It's fascinating that this beat, this rhythm is crystal clear, that there is a 17 beat. Now, even astronomers would have to say, yes, this is true. I mean, this is an astronomical fact. It is true that each successive eclipse are in these beats. That's a fact. Now, astronomers are going to say that's fun, that's interesting, that's curious, that's entertaining, doesn't have any real meaning in our lives, but astrologers would say, yes, it does have some meaning in our lives. And now that we're aware of this, we could think about what it means, and that we have these eclipse seasons, from March to October, the strong 34, and then 35 coming in July. Fascinating that these are the beats, the rhythms of the Saros cycle. So, as I said, what does it mean that I happen to be born 3 days after an eclipse that's vibrating, that's connected to other eclipses, It's connected to this series. It's like a thread in time that's in 34 vibration. It means that I was born into a historical context of cross-cultural connectedness, of mixing things together. Now, here's what I think from having looked at some of these. We're early in the thinking of this. And other people who work with Saros Cycle, like Alexander Mzragic and other people, have looked at a lot of these. They probably have some, no doubt additional insights. But my sense of it is this. I say believe because we haven't done a lot of research on this yet. My guess, based on what we've seen so far, is that the eclipse cycle shows you the context, the environmental context, the heritage, some of the heritage, just a certain thread. It's not all of your heritage, but it's showing one thread that connects you to the past and the future. It has very little to do with you individually. So it's not so much about your personal mission. It's not really describing you. It's describing the context that you were born into and that you're connected to. So this is saying I was born in a very clear, strong 34 vibration tapestry, which would mean it would be a time for people to connect, to interrelate, to step outside their box. So, excuse me, I was brought up on, Long Island, New York, where there were people from the United States and the part I lived in was this melting pot, the melting pot of the United States, where on the street I was born in, there were people from different countries and the intermixing and the interfacing of different cultures, and how that affected things. So that is the environment I was brought up in that was most available to me. It says nothing about my personal motivation. It's not about you. I don't believe these eclipse cycles are about you. It doesn't mean that I'm intercultural or that I'm motivated or that I have a special function or mission. It's just saying that this is the world I was brought up in, and this is, what the heritage was, and I can tune into it if I want to. I don't think it's essential or important. I may be wrong about that. But it is important to the extent that the environment we grow up in defines our possibilities, defines our pathways, defines our avenues of least resistance. And dealing with this intercultural mix, this melting pot, and exploring what those stories are and not fighting it, not fighting the force that people came into Ellis Island, into New York City or wherever they immigrated into, and they were forced to live together interculturally, and all of the ethnic battles that came out of that. It's just saying that's what you were born into. And the answer is obvious astrologically, is learn from each other, enjoy each other's stories, expand yourself into them. That's what's being asked. Okay, so, and it's not necessarily the most dominant or important thing, but it is a factor describing the context of your life, and that it has a history. There was a history that brought all this, interconnectedness of different cultures. I was also brought up, my mother's heritage, only going back 2 generations. My mother's parents were from Italy. So my grandparents, very Italian. We grew up around my mother's family, her brothers and sisters. So even though my last name is not Italian, her last name is Mancuso, and we are Italian, and we were brought up. So that's the way that we were brought up. So we, were brought up with this Italian thing. My father is, English, Irish, and etc. Other things, very different. He was from, a very different part of the United States, not that far away, but culturally very different from my mother's family, which was from the New York City, Bronx, Brooklyn area, and then out to Long Island, and my father from rural Pennsylvania. And so there's all this, so immediately surrounding me in the neighborhood, the concept, That's what it was saying. That's what it's saying, that I was brought up in that I'm going to be affected by that. I'm going to dwell in that. It's just one thread. It's just one thing that's happening. And again, I think it's just describing the historical context, the flow of what's happening. I don't think it's necessary that you have to make it part of your personal agenda, but you do have to live within it. Because it's not my chart. It's the cycle, historical cycle that I'm born in. And that, of course, is true. That's the basic idea. So if you're born in 32 vibration, that like November to February time period, especially around December, January, it's very strong 32 vibration, and you can calculate the eclipse before birth. You know, if you just look at that table here, and you look at the eclipse before birth, and then look at the one, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours later, that'll be the next one in the Saros Cycle. It'll confirm it. When you look at it, it'll say, same Saros Cycle, next one. When you look at those, and if you're born in, between November and February, and you do those 232 vibration charts, just like I showed you for the, in my case, let me go back to it. Here is my case with the bi-wheel. This is the eclipse before I was born, the eclipse after I was born, both in 17 vibration, and you will confirm by actually looking at it how strong the beat is. If you're born in like December to January, probably you're going to see very, very strong 32 vibration. So if you do the 8 vibration chart, you'll see a very tight square, 8 times 4. For example, you can do an 8 vibration chart that will appear as squares, 16 vibration chart that will appear as opposition, 32 vibration chart that will appear as conjunctions. I have lots of videos on how to look at harmonic charts and vibrational charts. So if you're born in that time period with strong 32 vibration, it means that this historical thread, and there are lots of historical threads. I don't think this is the only one. This historical thread's based on the chart of the country, and so I don't want to exaggerate the power of this Saros cycle. I believe it's just one thread of many, but there will be a thread there of very practical, straightforward action. What do you need to do? What situation are you in? Will a higher education improve your life or not? To what extent will it do it? What areas are hot areas for vocation, and vocation is a way of supporting your family. So this is important. It's not just about money, but how do I meet the demands of my life? If I live in a hot country, the temperature is hot and humid, how do I become comfortable in it, or very cold, or whatever the situation, whatever the political context is? How do we meet the demands of our lives and work through them without a lot of adornments or, just straightforward, unadorned, direct, practical, effective action? That's the emphasis. Get real, deal with it, do something about it. Don't, live in some make-believe world. Let's get down to it. Let's go. Let's fix it. Let's make a good life. Do something. That's the emphasis of that Saros cycle that you're born into, if you're born in that way. It's fine to do, there's other things to life. We have to follow our dream. We have to follow our passion. There's no doubt about that. But relate it to the real situation so you can make real progress. Now, if you're born with the strong 33 vibration Saros cycle, October, November, and you do those 2 consecutive 33 vibration charts, the Saros cycle before you were born, the prenatal eclipse before you were born, prenatal solar eclipse, the solar eclipse before you were born, the one that's 18 years and 11 days later, the next one in the Saros cycle, and you do the 11 vibration charts, they should be trine. You'll see that trine. If that orb is small, it means it's a very powerful, clear trine vibration. And that means that you are you're living in a historical moment. This is what the Saros Cycle is telling us. You're living in a historical moment of innovation and progress. That there's a loosening up. That people are feeling free. They're feeling less repressed. They're feeling less dragged down. And this innovation is surrounding you. This free-flowing energy is all around you. And that's the world you live in. It doesn't mean you need to be an innovator. It doesn't mean you need to be a progressive or something. It just means recognize that this is what's going on around you. Don't try to fight it. Don't try to deny it. This is what's going on. Now, I was born, as I showed before, in 34 vibration. If I was born in 33 vibration, that would make sense to me too. I happen to have a very strong 33 vibration chart. And if you go up another 3 times to 99 vibration, it's one of my very strongest vibrations. I have huge aspect patterns. I grew up, I was in my, late childhood, early teens in the 60s. This was a progressive time. I'm a progressive. So I can relate to being born in that as well. But actually, within the environment, my ancestry, my aunts and uncles, the street I was born up in, they didn't actually reflect that so much. The intercultural thing was actually more obvious. So my personal mission, I have 99 vibration, and I'm free-flowing and inventive and all this sort of stuff, and out of the box. But that's not what the Saros Cycle tells you. It's not describing you in the narrow sense. It's describing the context of your life, which is more 34 vibration. And 35 vibration, which comes up for a very short time in July, that's a lineage of mastery. The masters of art and science. It reminds me of families where people are brought up. This is common in some cultures where you're brought up with masters of music, for example, and you're given all those opportunities, creative mastery, excellence in instruments, tools, even cooking recipes, sophisticated music, sophisticated architecture, the depth, the heritage, and it's creative. So creative, expressive, also mastery in athletics. So the idea of being creative and developing mastery, that comes in 35 vibration. That's a wonderful vibration, you might say, to take advantage of. If you're born in that and you see that around you, you have access to engaging in that. It's not personal. None of this Saros Cycle stuff digs in. It's just the context. And because it's the context of your life, it presents certain opportunities and situations that you can participate in if you want to. Well, that's it, my friends. This video is a little bit longer than usual. We're at 38 minutes. Oh, I usually keep it around a half hour, but there we are, a 3-part series on some details about the Saros Cycle, what it is, some details about what's going on. I've included the basic information about it, as well as some very new, exciting observations about what's going on and how we might think about it in our lives. And some of this is, speculative, new ideas, new insights, new perspectives. So, it needs to be evaluated and tested and worked with. But especially this astronomical information that's not been discussed before, like the beats of the cycles and just the clarity about how many eclipses there are in a Saros cycle, that a Saros cycle can be all annular. I showed that in the previous video in this series, like the cycle that I was born after. I was born 3 days after a partial eclipse. That's part of a Saros cycle number 147, where all of the eclipses that are not partial are annular. The moon is far away. Some of them all are total, and some have a mix of both. Some Saros cycles are, let me say that again, some Saros cycles are only annular eclipses, Moon is visually smaller than the sun. Some are only total. Moon is visually bigger than the sun. And some have a series that are annular and a series that are total. I go over that in previous videos in the series. I'm just summarizing some of the things we learned about the nature of different Saros cycles. Because as we become aware of the astronomy, of the facts of it, then we can apply those ideas and see if they make sense. And even for people that are not astrologers, there's some, facts and information about Saros cycles that I think are fascinating for anyone, that these beats, these rhythms, these consistencies in the geometry and what's happening are there. Those are facts. And for us astrologers, in some way, this is going to be relevant to our lives. And I've given some indications of how I think that might happen. Okay, thank you very much, my friends. God bless. Namaste.